Who is the most delusional person you've known? I work in a small town radio station. I've seen lots of rookies fresh out of broadcast school let the tiny amount of fame they get from being on a small town radio station go to their head. This one guy came into work one day, madder than heck that small town radio famous wasn't famous enough to get him out of a speeding ticket. Worked a night job where I met someone who was studying rather than going to school. Eventually I got out of him that he was studying to be a seducer. He studied Cleopatra, Rasputin, Casanova, etc. to learn the art of seduction. Basically this guy's life plan was to just seduce his way through life. He had an intricate plan on how he was going to seduce our supervisor for a raise, seduce multiple spouses to support him, even how to get free coffee by seducing the barista. He must have done a lot of seducing to keep working that barely over minimum wage night job for years. Sounds like he put his buy-in into charisma, and his dump stat is intelligence. My brother was always bragging about how chicks he worked with wanted to frick him. Then after 2 or 3 months when he inevitably quit or got fired, whenever the guys were talking about chicks they hooked up with, he would always talk about these beautiful women that wanted him which he just never got around to hooking up with. One time after starting a new job, he comes home all excited and yells, "Holy crap, the receptionist at this place is gorgeous and guess what? She wants to frick me." I said, "Dude, you've been there one day. How do you know she wants to frick you?" So he says, "Well, I just walked through the front door and as I was passing by, she looks me dead in the eye and says, 'Good morning.'" I lost it with that last bit. "Good morning, she wants to bang me." That's the most delusional thing I've ever heard. My current boss. He thinks the business is doing okay or is in a rough spot. He's slowly choking and killing it with his managing. I see the shop closing mid to late August. Won't you feel stupid when it closes in early September? Seriously though, I hope he turns it around quick and that you don't lose your job. And if you do, I hope you find something quickly. The pastor of a church who believed that he was, his own words, God's gift to preaching, even though attendance was dropping precipitously. When told that his sermons were too long and meandering, and that the people wanted more prayer to God instead, he replied, "People don't come to church for God, they come to hear what I have to say." Guess who's going to heck for pride? My aunt. My mom's sister. She constantly stirs drama with other people and then calls you out for being mean to her. WTF lady. For example, one time I came outside and I see her pull up in her car. She starts chit-chatting to my mom. They're talking about her haircut. I tell my mom we needed to go and she drove away shortly after. Totally fine. I get a call from another relative a week later that she's angry with me because the day she came over I rolled my eyes at her and she reads lips. She knows I said something about her. This didn't happen. She then continues to post on social media how karma is gonna get me, while simultaneously commenting on all of my stuff, saying how cute my daughter is. Delusion. A very, very good friend of mine comes from a super rich family. His dad recently bought $1 million home to sell it to him for under $300 K. He thinks his family isn't that wealthy, and this isn't that abnormal. My little sister. Me and my eldest sister were raised by an alcoholic mother who left us with random people so she could get drunk. When I was about 6 my mom sobered up and had my little sister. The girl is delusional and has adopted the idea that she went through what me and my older sister went through. She recalls memories that never happened. She swears my mom beat her. Never happened. She makes up stories, like she was a mortician. She traveled around the world. She dated such and had tons of money. It's so weird. She spends every waking moment on Facebook and posts every single thing that goes on in her life. She has a felony. She beat her baby daddy until they broke up and now both of those psychos have a really crappy custody fight going on. I could go on and on. Sounds like a compulsive liar. I dated one of those. Frick all that. My schizophrenic uncle. He ran away from home US in his teens to Turkey, converted to Islam, came home a few years later, believed he was the son of God and robbed a bank so he could give the money to the homeless in the city we live in. He was institutionalized for many years, was released one day with no notice to our family and died shortly thereafter of an accident caused by his mental illness. And robbed a bank so he could give the money to the homeless in the city we live in. Well, I can't fault his intentions. This dude who used to live near me. There is a laundry list of stories, but 2 gems are when he took those fake $1 billion bills you get at Halloween from church groups to Walmart, filled 8 shopping carts with random expensive stuff, mostly electronics, and tried to buy them with the money, or when, after the cops being called for him shooting our much younger neighbor with an airsoft gun, he grabbed a samurai sword and charged at the cops. Spoiler alert, he got tased. He later told us if they shot at him he would cut the bullets in half like Ryan Reynolds did in X-Men Origins Wolverine. Dude's lucky he didn't get shot. My ex-boyfriend plays the victim to his friends and family, yet I have spoken to 2 of his exes and we've all called the cops on him at some point. He obsesses and stalks and harasses. He tried to break into my app once after we broke up to apologize to me and tried to convince my roommate I was unstable and making rash choices. We've been broken up 7 months now. I have a new BF, and he still sends me emails saying I'm being unreasonable. I spent the first 11 months of my army career with this one guy who had absolutely no idea that everybody hated him. He had this horrible personality where he talked too loud, said frick all the time, stole crap and fricked with people's stuff, and just seemed kind of like an alien trying to mimic heterosexual male interactions. But the alien had only studied bad sports movies and war films. He was incredibly cringy. Guy was raised by a single mother that clearly allowed him to get away with anything, and in the 11 months I knew him, I never once heard him take responsibility for anything. An example, we'll call him PH for dialogue purposes. We're in the lunch line and he gets a big bowl of clam chowder soup. He spills a little over the side of the bowl and onto the tray, and we're like, looks like you spilled a bit. Keep in mind, we saw him spill it. PH. Number. I didn't spill it. Me. Who spilled it? PH. Frick. I don't frickin' know, I guess someone frickin' knocked me and made the bowl spill. As said, he swore all the time. You know you swear too much when a bunch of army dudes think you swear too much. Yeah, literally can't take responsibility for spilling a little bit of soup on a tray. As said, though, the most delusional aspect of his personality was his complete inability to accept that nobody liked him. When our final course, combat engineer training, finished and we were all about to get posted off to our respective units and bases across the country, he'd always talk about how he was going to hang with the people who were going the same place as him and maybe be roommates with one of them. To the man, each one of them never wanted to see him ever again. It took on average about 2 weeks from the point of meeting him to completely despise him, and he was never once aware of or willing to admit this. As said by one of our sergeants at the end of our course, at the course party, that kid's a freaking lunatic. Couldn't have said it better myself. The PH is not balanced. Met a guy in the psych ward with psychosis who believed he was a prophet. Really nice guy. I have a quote written by him. Madness is not pure error, it is nature's dissatisfaction with genius. My grandmother was a nurse in a psych ward years ago, and she encountered a patient who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. He even talked like Jesus. She said, if I hadn't known he was nuts, I might have believed him. My cousin has insisted to my family that I get exorcised because I'm gay and autistic. She thinks that only the devil himself can corrupt someone to this extent. The only problems with her theory are that I am neither gay nor autistic, and she's the one touched by Satan. This reminds me of that Yahoo Answers post where someone said that his mom made him wear a butt plug at all times when he was 5 or Satan would rape him and make him gay. Guy at my college thought he was God's gift to women just because he worked out daily. He looked more like an albino Dwayne Johnson with curly hair. It was like Casper took steroids and started hitting on anything that moved. That last sentence really made me feel like I could hate him and be justified in doing so. My little sister who somehow got it into her head that we grew up in the ghetto, we didn't, and that it is okay to keep popping out kids with different baby daddies because if God didn't want me to have babies, he wouldn't let me get pregnant. OMFG, I want to hit her in the face every time she says something like this. BTW, she is now pregnant with her 5th child, right after being a complete hypocrite when she got pregnant last year and had an abortion because she wanted a girl. She is finally having her girl, so hopefully she stops. And before I get a bunch of angry messages, she lives off the government. Baby daddies do not support their kids, so she brags about being a hustler. SMDH. Had an abortion because she wanted a girl. This is where I draw the line. That's not even delusional. That's one of the most selfish and pointless things I've heard in a long time. My father. The man does not live in the same reality as the rest of us. He is almost 60 and still thinks he's going to make it in the music business despite the fact that he has no band and plays no gigs. He's a passable guitar player, but the typical guy that had a band in the 70s and early 80s takes himself way too seriously as if he's some kind of prolific musician. He took some mediocre pictures of the band Genesis in the 80s and has called himself a photographer since then. He built himself and couple friends some very primitive websites and calls himself a web designer. He took a, as in one, class on sound engineering at the community college in like 1980 and he calls himself a sound engineer. He has a couple of video cameras and knows the basics of video editing, and now he bills himself as a videographer for local bands. The man just makes crap up to make himself seem important. He hasn't had an actual job in 13 years. He's been self-employed in that time, but you need to have actual clients and stuff. He thinks he's above everyone, the smartest guy in the room, and just this grand person. It's ridiculous. IDK how his wife puts up with it. Seems like he must be smarter than at least one other person in the room if he has a spouse willing to deal with that garbage. My uncle decided his thoughts were so profound he tried selling printed canvases with some of his quotes on them. Yes, sentences he came up with himself. And no, he is not successful or any sort of leader in his field, nor anything that would warrant quoting or displaying anything he has ever said. He also decided to write a book on his life, of which he has achieved sucking my auntie dry of money and contact with her family because none of us want to be around him. Spiritually pious and delusions of grandeur. An ex-friend of mine cried multiple times because she thought guys were only interested in me and not her, and that I must be doing something insane to attract their attention since she's the skinnier, more obsessed with her looks one. My guess, her personality was probably repulsive after 2 weeks tops. I'm guessing she was clingy too. She also probably wasn't nearly as attractive as she thought and confused skinny with hot. A girl that was interested in me told me that she came from another planet, that she wasn't human. She was 100% serious, even told me I was like her and we were maybe from the same planet. 10/10 would nope again. In fairness, you probably were from the same planet, just not the one she thinks. Definitely my uncle. He claims to be the descendant of some wealthy noble family from Germany and goes around genealogy websites adding himself and my grandmother to said family, claiming she's a princess. Not my dad though, he doesn't count. This is only the latest one. He also has pretended to be a priest and a diplomat at some point, as well as having several diseases, so he could get money, sympathy from people and heavy prescription drugs, HIV, melanoma, Parkinson's. The list goes on. We tried having him admitted, but he always gets discharged a day or two later, since he's very good at convincing everyone he's fine and that's us that want him out of the picture. He may not necessarily be convincing them he's fine, it's just most places you can't be involuntarily held for more than a day or two unless you are assessed as a physical threat to yourself or others. Man, I thought most of these would be funny, but now I'm kinda sad. It's terrifying to think that people can go their whole lives, their one shot at existence, being so sheltered and afraid. What a bummer. My friend's ex went off her bipolar meds because she was convinced love was the cure to her bipolar disorder. I feel better now, so that means I don't need my meds anymore. Bipolar isn't a bacterial infection. You don't take meds for a while and then you're cured of it. Weirdly, they broke up after about the millionth violent mood swing, and now she spends her days getting fired from every single job and doing hallucinogenics. Sadly, it sometimes takes a few times after feeling better and then stopping your meds because you feel better now to realize that this isn't the best way to do things. It happens way too often. Source: bipolar who had gone off meds because I felt better when I was younger. Guy I knew who wanted me to quit my well-paying job, quit school to spend more time with him to watch him sit on the couch all day, be a potato and play video games. He couldn't wrap his head around why I also refused to regularly attend comedy shows with him on Sunday or Monday nights. The reasons I wouldn't go: 1. He wouldn't ask me beforehand what my schedule was, just assumed I'd naturally want to go. He'd buy the tickets and apply the pressure. 2. I work. He did not. I'm also doing my MBA. 3. The shows were for the most terrible. Think open mic types with unpolished amateurs. That's right. He thought the world revolved around his schedule. Oh, and he was a narcissistic babbling logorrheic who couldn't STFU when walking down the street. You know, the kind who has to point out every single thing he sees, from the dog passing by to the items in the window to crap on the curb. Both my aunt and uncle on my mom's side of the family, mom's brother and his wife. My grandmother's health was declining and my uncle fully supported my aunt so she didn't work. Instead of putting my grandmother in a home, they offered to move her into their house so my aunt could take care of her. Meanwhile, my mom was in the process of divorcing my dad, selling the house, and working 70 hours a week to keep up at a job she hated. In the midst of all that, my aunt asked if my mom could come over to be with my grandmother on the day she was meeting with the lawyer to finalize her divorce. Mom said she couldn't make it and my aunt told her that if she really loved her mother she'd make time and would move her appointment with the lawyer, even though she came to the house every day after work to see her. Finally, my mom admitted to my uncle, her brother, that she was suicidal and wanted a way out. He then proceeded to tell her she was a horrible person and was useless because she didn't want to help. That was years ago and no one in my family has said a word to them since. We've all moved on and are very happy without them. A friend growing up kinda just started being a piece of crap as soon as we got out of high school. I was friends with both him and his girlfriend. It got to the point where he would tell her to walk to my house after work instead of picking her up because I was close by and he didn't want to drop what he was doing, usually getting high in another friend's basement. Then he physically assaulted her. I blew up at him, she wised up and moved on. And then he had the balls to actually post my friends and girlfriend abandoned me. I guess nice guys really do finish last after she left him. Never wanted to get physical with a former friend so far. Then when I was 18-21, I had a 40-year-old boss who just so badly wanted to be one of us kids. Only he was also a creep. Knew he was a creep, but blamed it on being Hispanic. How you are so self-aware while also fooling yourself and being a creep is beyond me. My fiance has a childhood friend who doesn't believe in space. He doesn't believe there are planets either. He also believes the Earth is flat, which somehow isn't a planet either. When asked to explain his beliefs, he provided a biblical explanation that made no sense. And I don't just mean no sense like that's ridiculous, but no sense like, I have no idea what you just said. A friend of mine tried to argue with me that him coming from a wealthy family made it harder for him to find a job. His reasoning was bias, not enough experience. No one said you couldn't work when you were younger, you just didn't have to. That's also weird to me because most of the jobs I've looked at didn't care that I had worked as a cashier and bank teller. They only cared about professional type work or internships. My father. This dude fell for the Nigerian prince spam twice. He believes every single conspiracy theory he hears. He thinks God cured him of autism, which vaccines gave him. He is by far the dumbest person I know or have ever known. But he thinks he is a genius. Give me your father's email please. I will contact him and get these Nigerian scammers. But first I will need to confirm our trust. So I will deposit 250,000 euros to him right away. And when we catch those guys, he will get all his money plus 10%. I only ask for a small fee to help me leave this country. By the way, I am not Nigerian. My stepsister, she, and her mother, have some weird delusion where anything bad that happens to them will be taken care of by someone else. They never have to take responsibility for anything or actively attempt to change their own lives. It's all about what someone else can do for them. It's the oddest thing. Example. Just got off the phone with my mom telling me my stepsister had no idea she would have student loans to pay back once she graduated. She thought the university gave her a free ride. Holy crap. It didn't really hit me until you gave the example how bad it was. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I know a girl that is incredibly against modern medicine, including all vaccines. She believes that giving her child proper nutrition will keep them from getting diseases. Yup, just take some celery, that'll get rid of that polio. family of some friends of mine. They have 8 kids, 9th on the way, and they live by the philosophy that God will provide. They do not work. They are barely able to feed the kids. They all have dirty, ragged clothes and live with whichever family members are able to tolerate them at the time. One of those friends of mine lined the job up for the father, who quit 2 weeks into the job. When I say quit, I mean he just stopped showing up. And when confronted about all of these things and the well-being of their kids, they just keep saying God will provide. A dear friend of mine, very smart, capable woman otherwise, had her college paid for by her parents. One day she said to me, completely serious, "Sometimes I wish that I had student loans." I told her please feel free to cut me a $500 check every month, and she didn't have a lot to say about that. I also used to work with a real born on third base but thought she hit a triple kind of person. One year, I got royally screwed by taxes because I didn't realize my employer was neglecting to take out some of the taxes they were supposed to, and I ended up owing $2,500 plus in taxes, which forced me to empty my savings to the point where I had $90 total in all my bank accounts. This woman looked me square in the eye and asked me, completely serious, "Why didn't you bring it to your accountant?" I grew up middle class, or maybe even upper middle class, but my parents never let me feel like I deserved it. The obliviousness of people who grew up with money is just infuriating to me. Like those people who unironically ask why don't they just get a better job? A woman named Margaret who lived with a friend when I was a teenager. She believed she had tracking devices in her body and her teeth. She drilled her own fillings out in the bathroom with an actual drill. One morning we woke up to her standing over us with an iron. The iron was plugged in and hot. When we asked her what the frick, she mumbled some incoherent crap, put the iron down and walked off. She randomly freaked out and would go to her condo she owned, but was afraid to live in, then call friend's dad to come get her because she was locked in her bedroom to keep the people there from getting her. Never anyone there obviously. When she finally moved out, we were packing her stuff up and found a diary of some sort that documented her and a friend's abduction by aliens, the chip implanting, and a loaded .357. She killed herself a short time later. This is just sad. Was an inpatient at an adolescent's mental hospital for about a week. This girl came in and she was scary to listen to. She was screaming about the yellow brick road, how we're all damned, something about Jesus. You know those horror movies where someone is possessed? She sounded like that. She had to be locked in the padded room a lot of the time. Hope she's doing okay. I knew a girl that would instantly fall in love with almost any boy she met. I mean, it was hard to talk to her because she was always talking about a boy she wanted to kiss or ask out and she'd become obsessed with them. The problem was that 99.9% of the time, the guys didn't have any interest in her and I'd get calls in the late hours of the night with her crying because some boy she liked didn't want her. It got really bad to the point that her parents had to shut down her phone's camera and texting ability because she was sending naked pictures of herself to guys to try and win them back. So now the only way she talks to people is by calling them, and she is always calling me to the point that I haven't answered her in months. Sounds like it could possibly be a personality disorder. Even if it isn't, I hope her family can convince her to seek counseling. About 10 years ago I had a friend whose mother was extremely New Age Christian. She taught her kids that the earth was only 12,000 years old, dinosaurs went extinct about 8,000 years ago, and that humans have only been around for about 3,000 years. Evil then sprung forth, so God created Jesus to rectify this. That in itself is quite common in New Age Christian thinking, I believe. However, here's where it gets interesting. She would often go into rants how she failed out of college due to arguing with her professors over the validity of carbon dating. I think she said that you can't just define carbon being a certain age and then apply it to all things. She also argued about knowing the age of the universe according to researching the Bible, rather than the lambda thing people currently use to identify it as 13.8 billion years old. I could be mistaken, my memory is foggy. I couldn't argue with her. Not that I agreed whatsoever, but have you ever tried to argue with someone that delusional? Perhaps not delusional, but she's certainly prone to flights of fancy. My mother. She's got some belief that rich Chinese princes are waiting for me at Harvard, that technical schools are no places for women who want to marry well despite being a professor in a science who attended a technical school for graduate study, and that there are some things that men are just better at than women, like math, and writing, and cooking at fine restaurants. She also believes she's the best parent around, which I'll assure you, she's not. Definitely the cause of a real deep-seated self-hatred that stems from her constant yes. As a child I was the most beautiful and most athletic and most intelligent in my class. Every boy wanted to date me. I don't know what's wrong with you. Or sometimes, you must have too much of your father in you. Most of this comes from the fact that she thinks a woman's job is to find the best marriage, which she thinks she failed at as she has to work still. And for some reason the best marriage means marrying a man from a wealthy family with a nice liberal arts degree. Otherwise you're failure. She's also quite racist, but I'm a minority. There's no way I can be racist, she says as she yells at every poor driver for being Hispanic, mocks most languages that aren't Chinese, and insists that anyone who isn't East Asian or white has no business driving nice cars or wearing nice clothes, and if they do, wow, they really are breaking out of their place. And as men do, she doesn't believe in mental illness, so that kind of sucks. Because of course admitting to your mother in a fit of tears that you really did have a lot of suicidal thoughts is just a cry for attention and a reason to keep you from seeing your friends for a while. Thinking. The whole pushing the idea that women should go to college to find husbands is like the 1 step forwards 5 step back for women's rights. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.